Is it possible to be Yu-Gi-Oh! The Duelists of the Roses without having a single monster card in my deck? Hello everyone, this is Aqua, Sloth, and I was feeling a little extra masochistic today and thought, what new ways can I devise to torture myself and suck every last drop of fun out of a game that I once loved? So today, I present to you my newest abomination of an idea, the No Monsters deck. Now, real quick before we get into the rules of the run, in between the time it took me to record the gameplay for this challenge and write the script for the video, a channel named Robin and Zephyr actually had the same question and put out a video a little over a year ago completing this very same challenge. And while I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with two channels attempting the same type of challenge, for sake, look at any Dark Souls challenge run and you are guaranteed to find it on another 4 channels. But given that Duelists of the Roses is pretty niche, I at the very least wanted to mention their video and say that I am very stoked to see other content creators playing this 20-year-old forgotten gem. Also, to avoid any weird YouTube gremlins that crawl out of their cave to yell at me, I started recording the gameplay for this challenge on January 29th of 2024. And hopefully, as you will see, our approaches to this challenge are completely different. Anyway, that video is linked below if you do want to check it out for yourself, but without further delays, let's get into this shit. For those unaware, there are 3 types of cards in Duelists of the Roses. Spell cards, which can be used on your turn to do things like regain life points, revive monsters, and deal damage to your opponent. Trap cards, which are similar to spell cards, but can be activated on your opponent's turn to do things like counter or disrupt their play. And most notably, monster cards. These are the backbone of any normal deck, and in most cases, vital for winning a duel. But is there a way to build a deck that has no monsters in it? Is it any good, and what would it look like? Firstly, let's go over some of the rules of the challenge. Number 1, I will obviously not be able to have any monster cards in my deck. My deck leader does not count since he is required to leave the deck edit screen and also can't attack anyway, so he doesn't really matter. I also decided to go with Trap Master since he kinda fits the theme of the deck. Number 2, I will not be using any burn cards like Tremendous Fire or Just Desserts, seeing as I could just use them to win every duel and well, that's no fun. Number 3, I will not be using any hideously overpowered cards like Raigeki, Mirror Force, or Mirror Wall, seeing as they are already so broken in the base game and would take all of the challenge out of the challenge. Also, their deck cost is insanely high, which leads me into number 4. I will attempt to beat both sides of the campaign without editing my deck, meaning I will need to design it from the beginning to take on the lowest deck cost opponent at 757, as well as the highest deck cost final boss at 1,985. I think that's pretty much all the rules. I don't know, I'm kind of just making this up as I go. As far as the actual deck is concerned, here's a quick breakdown of what I'm running. Starting off, we've got 3 Monster Reborn. These will be my only ways of controlling monsters on the field and dealing direct damage to my opponent, so without these, there really is not a run. 2 Grave Robbers, which will allow me to bring back any spell or trap card from the graveyard. And while these can be used to bring back the enemy's cards, they can also be used on my own graveyard to bring back another Monster Reborn, effectively acting as 2 more copies. Dark Hole, if shit starts going sideways, a few life point recovery cards, 3 Megamorphs, which can be equipped to any monster card in the game, increasing its attack by 300 points per card, 2 Mesmeric Controls and an Infinite Dismissal for spellbind the enemy and or emergency getaways, 3 Invisible Wires and 1 Acid Trap Hole, which will actually give me monsters to revive, seeing as Monster Reborn only works on monsters that have already been destroyed and are in the graveyard. And finally, 3 trusty fake traps. There are a few other filler cards that I needed to put in to get to the 40 card minimum, but these will be the key players for the entire run. To start off, I decided to side with Seto so that I could get a bit of a running start before being thrust into stronger opponents. So first up is Teia. Teia is by far the worst duelist in the game, seeing as her strongest card is Air Knight Parshath at 1900 attack, and if she plays correctly, which she never does, she can use all 3 copies of Silver Bow and Arrow to max him out at 3900 on the mountains. Starting out pretty lukewarm, I begin by dumping cards in search for one of my traps that I can use to destroy her monsters so that I can resurrect them later with Monster Reborn. Turn 3, I draw into Invisible Wire, which I use the next turn to take out her Doma, the Angel of Silence, sending on a one-way trip straight to the graveyard, meaning all I need to do now is draw a Monster Reborn and I can actually have a monster on the field. She also triggered my Eat Gaboon with Binding Chain, but well, that card sucks and I don't want it, so we're ignoring it. Finally, on turn 8, I draw into Monster Reborn, which I use to bring back her Doma, hitting her for 2100 points of direct damage. I then use Grave Robber to bring back the same Monster Reborn, resurrect her Goddess with the Third Eye, who activated my Invisible Wire 2 turns ago, and give her the old double dip deluxe with Doma and Goddess. With our first opponent out of the way, it's onward and upward to London to duel the Crab Master himself, Tristan. I start off full beans by using Dimension Hole to get as up in his shit as I possibly can, which kinda backfires and he swamps my ass with Uraby and Wicked Mirror, who I had to cripple the next turn with Infinite Dismissal and Paralyzing Potion. I then take out his Uraby with Acid Trap Hole and his Deep Sea Shark with Invisible Wire, all the while trying to buy as much time as possible in order to draw into Monster Reborn. At this point he's amping up the pressure a little too much for my liking, so I start to dump cards and retreat back to my side until finally on turn 15, I draw into my first Monster Reborn and use it to bring back his Deep Sea Shark. I then take out his Kanan the Sword Mistress, dealing 1,000 points of damage to his life points, and use Grave Robber to bring back my Monster Reborn in preparation for next turn. In a real big brain ass play, I reborn Uraby and send him and Deep Sea Shark up into the darkness, and activate Call of the Haunted, which I only really threw in as deck filler, seeing as it has a whole 1 deck cost, but it actually came in super handy, so I am very thankful it was in there. With my Dino Shark Zombie combo, I push up into his backlines and take out his Defender of the Throne Room. I hit him directly for 1,900 points of damage, then use Monster Reborn to bring back his Sword Mistress, who deals the final 750 points needed to end the duel. 2 duels in, and I was feeling pretty good. I was initially kind of unsure I could even get past Taya, let alone her and Tristan first try on both, but like all good things, they must be stopped by big busty bitches. Maya's up next, and hot damn, was this a rough one. I was feeling pretty good about the first run, having drawn straight into Dark Piercing Light and Invisible Wire right off the bat. That was until she sent out a juiced up Harpy Lady Sisters who plowed straight through my Invisible Wire and were quite literally 2 spaces away from 2-turning me. I laid down a Mesmeric Control to bring her sisters down to a still terrifying 2650, but that would at least allow my second Invisible Wire to take them out, saving me from a certain death only 4 turns in. No, that certain death would reappear 3 turns later when she used her own Monster Reborn to bring back her sisters, which was kind of when I knew this one was a wash. Attempt 2 started out decently well, having drawn straight into Invisible Wire and Acid Trap Hole, meaning I had at least some protection while I wait to draw a Monster Reborn. She once again steamrolled straight over my Invisible Wire with a 3100 Punished Eagle, which I was able to take out the following turn with Acid Trap Hole. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, why didn't you start with Acid Trap Hole instead of risking Invisible Wire? And to that I say, I don't know. I probably should have started with Acid Trap Hole instead of risking my Invisible Wire, but what's done is done. So, putting my whole pussy on the line for this play, I Hail Married my Monster Reborn into her summoning area, with the hope that I could reborn her Punished Eagle and ideally end the duel the following turn. And wouldn't you know it, she also has an Acid Trap Hole, so on to attempt 3. This one was comical in how stupid I played, but you know what they say, 3rd time's the charm. And if by charm they mean I bricked my first hand, which you might think means I gave up, but little do you know, this was only the beginning of one of the craziest fucking plays you have ever seen. After cowering in the corner with no real plan to speak of, I started dumping cards in search for anything even remotely playable. I do eventually draw into a Monster Reborn, which I use to bring back her fusion-foddered Harpy Lady. I then use Grave Robber to bring back my Monster Reborn, which I activate to bring back another one of her cards, that being her Kanan the Sword Mistress, the same card that I used last duel to beat Tristan, and if that ain't poetic, I don't really know what is. Genuinely don't. Poems are the ones that rhyme, right? Like fucking Dr. Seuss. Because this is Duelists of the Roses and the TCG rules are basically non-existent, I was able to run these cards together on the field to fuse for my own Punished Eagle and pump that motherfucker up to 4,000 attack using all 3 copies of my Megamorph and a Grave Rob copy of Gust Fan. When I tell you I was pulling this play straight out of my ass, I mean I was on the verge of prolapsing that bitch with how much I was yanking out of it. Through some light AI abuse, I bait her Wing Eagle into curse breaking itself, attack it for 1,700 points of damage, destroy her Spellbound Punished Eagle and Peacock for an additional 2,200 points of damage, and finish her off with one final attack to her single Harpy Lady. Taking to the sea, Mako was up next with basically the same issue as mine. That being that his field advantage boosts his monsters a little bit higher than the majority of the trap cards in my deck, meaning the only consistently reliable cards I can use are Acid Trap Hole and Invisible Wires. Opening up with an Invisible Wire and Monster Reborn, I push forward to take out his red archery girl, then use Mesmeric Control to weaken his best monster, Aqua Dragon. I then take out said Aqua Dragon the following turn and bring it back to life with Monster Reborn. 7 turns in and I already took control of his ace? This one's in the bag, baby. He even boosted me up with his own Aqua Course. What a fucking guy. Knowing that he has multiple Aqua Dragons in his deck, I preemptively use Megamorph on my dragon, bringing him to 3150, take out his second Aqua Dragon and bring it back under my control, then proceed to mow down every single thing that he sends out. We did unfortunately lose Aqua Dragon Jr. to that slippery bastard Change Slime, but thankfully I did have a third Monster Reborn with his name on it, ready to bring him back to deal the final kill shot. Joey is up next and actually did something that I don't know that I've ever seen him do, at least never this early in a duel. This dude busted out a goddamn Red Eyes Black Metal Dragon on turn 3, which I was thankfully able to hit with Mesmeric Control and Invisible Wire, then resurrect it with Monster Reborn the following turn. Because Black Metal Dragon is technically a fusion monster, I was also able to bring back his regular Red Eyes, which I used to take out his Judgment Hand, dealing 1000 points of damage. He then pulled out the iconic Sword and Shield, which did lower my Black Metal Dragon's attack to 2900, but that's still well above the majority of the cards in his deck. To ensure that I kept my terrain boost, I activated Call of the Haunted to turn all my monsters into zombies, and just for good measure, boosted Black Metal Dragon up with 2 Megamorphs, which gave him enough attack for lethal. Heading over to Paris, we enter one of the most uneventful duels of the run, with Shoddy Morton and his mishmash deck of straight up garbage. Not gonna lie, nothing happened for the first 10 turns of this duel, besides me taking out his Prisman, and at some point he dumped his Flame Cerebus, which I was able to bring back and zombify to deal 1300 points of damage to his life points. I then Megamorph Flame Cerebus and pushed his deck leader into the corner, where I proceeded to hit him for the final 2700 points needed to progress to the next duel. Yugi's Grandpa was a duel that I was expecting to either be a total pain in the ass or a cool walk in the park, and it ended up being like a sort of nice window view of driving by something slightly neat. Probably wouldn't stop for a full gander, but it was okay. The hardest part about this duel was actually getting a monster to be reborn, since he usually plays pretty defensively and rarely makes the first move, but thankfully I did draw into a monster reborn pretty early, and he has the tendency to dump cards in favor of the Exodia pieces, so at the very least I had some weaker monsters I could deal with if necessary. Continuing to make my way through the trenches, I finally pop monster reborn to bring back his Tau the Chanter and beef him up with 2 Megamorphs, needlessly reborn his Phantom Duan, and finish him off with an attack from each monster. Now, I was originally going to leave this out since, truthfully, y'all don't need to know, and it didn't really affect anything, but I did make a slight miscalculation when I was initially building this deck. When I was adding the filler cards to get to the 40 card minimum, I didn't realize that they had pushed me to 761 deck cost, which is 4 over the required amount to duel Bakura. To make up for this, I removed one of my Gift of the Mystical Elves and replaced it with a Bear Trap, but honestly, it didn't really ever save me in a duel, and also, I made up the goddamn rules, so I say it's fine. With my slightly modified deck, I head over to Ren to fight Bakura, who has one of the weakest decks of any opponent in the game, but I would still say is one of the more challenging duels across the board. On turn 1, I draw into Dark Hole, which I use a couple turns later to wipe the board, then use Monster Reborn to bring back his highest attack monster, Leo Gun, sitting at a whopping 1750 attack. I hit him twice with Leo Gun before he moves further into the crush, and then for no discernible reason, after he escapes me, he moves right back to where he was, which allows me to get in the final hit needed to end the duel. Yugi's up next, and we start out pretty not good, sending out a Mesmeric Control and Infinite Dismissal, mainly just to kind of see what we're working with. He triggers Mesmeric Control with Summon Skull, dropping him to a measly 1200 attack, and I reborn his discarded Beaver Warrior to deal a quick 1700 points of damage. I follow that attack up with another 1200 points the following turn, then use Dark Hole to wipe the board of his beefy Gemini Elves, sitting at a cool 2900 attack points. I then use Grave Robber to bring back my Monster Reborn, resurrect his Beaver Warrior for one more run, and finish him off 2 turns later. I truly did not expect that of all the cards in his deck, that Beaver Warrior would be the one that would champion this duel, but may he rest in power always. Amen. Moving on to the final fight of the White Rose campaign, we head back to Stonehenge to face Man of the Den Fablier Chakra Edition. This version of MFL is, in my opinion, way easier than the Skull Knight variant, but he can still be kind of an ass kicker if you rush in too recklessly, like I'm about to do. Turn 2, he busts out Ryoku, which halves my life points and adds them to his monster's attack, which I attempt to bait into attacking Acid Trap Hole, avoiding the threat entirely. It was at this moment that I also realized that he does have a copy of Royal Decree, which renders all trap cards ineffective, canceling the effect of Acid Trap Hole and forcing me to eat 5100 points of damage straight to the fucking mouth. Could have played that one better, I'll admit. Attempt 2 starts out better than Attempt 1, but still far from ideal. His Skull Knight triggers my Mesmeric Control, which I follow up with Invisible Wire and Monster Reborn, hitting him for 2650 points of damage, but the celebration is cut very short by his roided out Summon Skull, who destroys my Skull Knight and deals 850 points of damage to my life points. Thankfully, I am able to recover and use Mesmeric Control to spellbind his Baphomet, giving me the chance to bring back another Monster Reborn and Skull Knight for round 2, who once again attacks for the remaining 1350 life points. We're at the halfway point, and honestly, it's still in great shape. Aside from the thrashing that Mai gave us and the poor planning of the MFL attempt, we're currently sitting 10 for 3, which is damn good in my book. Jumping sides and joining up with Yugi, our first opponent of the Red Rose campaign is Weevil Underwood in the Forests of Chester. I start off by taking out 2 of his Hunter Spiders with Bear Trap and Invisible Wire, and his Hercules Beetle with an Acid Trap Hold. I then reborn one of his monsters and hit him for 2100 points of damage, and follow that up with another 2000 points from his Hercules Beetle, making quick work of this dweeby little prick. Rex is up next, and I'll be honest, I do not know what I was doing on this first attempt. In reviewing the footage, I for some reason pop Grave Robber on turn 4 to bring back the same Grave Robber, and then activated again the following turn to bring back Dimension Hole? After watching the rest of the duel, I still don't know what I was going for, but that's the opening. Following up that expert play, I used Monster Reborn to bring back his Trachodon to take out his Little D, hell yeah, then get absolutely railed by his ace monster, Brachioradus. I then use Invisible Wire to take out Brachioradus, bring it back to take out his Practical, then lose him the following turn to a second, beefed up Practical, who I then take out with Acid Trap Hole. He does hit me for a solid 2100 points of damage from Crawling Dragon number 2, who I then take out with my second reborn Brachioradus, before coming in for the final attack from the previously slain Mega Zowler. Moving on down to Exeter, we face the recently balding and zombie-wielding Necromancer. Right off the jump, I take out his Armored Zombie with Invisible Wire, then bring him back to take out his Grim Reaper. I then take out his Shadow Spectre and Pumpkin with 2 more well-placed wires, and hit him for a fat 2000 points of damage. He claps back by using Darkhold to wipe the board of my Grave Rob Monster Reborn and Armored Zombie, then hits me for a hefty 2700 points of damage from his Skelgon. Thankfully, for whatever reason, he decided to not summon this turn, which allowed me to bring back his Pumpkin and deal the final 1900 points of damage needed to end the duel. He seriously could have played any card there and blocked me, but, you won't hear me complaining. Aside from Mai and MFL, Darkness Ruler is the only other duel that I had to run back, which just goes to show how powerful terrain bonuses can be. For attempt 1, I used 2 Invisible Wires to take out his Shadow who controls the Dark and Lord of Zemia, but way overextend and get hit for 1850 points of damage from his Crass Clown. I reborn his Lord of Zemia to hit his leader directly, only to be reminded that he has a fuck ton of trap cards in his deck, and sadly get hit with the damage reduction of Tears of the Mermaid, followed up by Terra the Terrible. Bringing back Lord of Zemia for a second run, I once again get hit with another copy of Tears, rendering my Megamorphs pretty much useless and dropping Zemia to a piss poor 1800. We go back and forth like this a couple more times, just basically trading traps, and eventually I do Darkhold the board, but inevitably I just run out of cards and I am forced to surrender. Attempt 2 starts out somehow worse than Attempt 1, resulting in me once again using Darkhold to wipe the board, then bring back his Lord of Yamimakai, and wouldn't you know it, Infinite Dismissal. Oh, no worries, I'll just reborn his man-eating treasure never mind. Mesmeric Control, love that. Love to see it. Thank you. Third try is once again the charm, which is when I finally realize that I can use my shittier spell cards to trigger his trap cards, saving my monsters and clearing the way for them to attack. I take out his Ryukishin Power with an Acid Trap Hold 2 turns in, hit him for 2100 points of damage the next turn, then follow that attack up with another 2100 points of damage on the following turn. These duels are truly either just completely run out of cards and surrender, or beat him in 2 turns, and there's like no in between. Moving on up to Pegasus, I start out by sending Eatgaboon up the left side entrance, which immediately gets triggered by his Manga Ryuren, who I then proceed to kite around for the next 11 turns while I wait for an Invisible Wire. I also take out his second strongest card, Bickery Box with an Acid Trap Hole, who I reborn the following turn to begin my assault from within the Toon terrain. Now I stressed second strongest card because as soon as I get him out, he hits me with his actual strongest card, Toon Summon Skull, who destroys Bickery Box just as fast as I got him out. Thankfully, when off the Toon terrain, Toon Summon Skull is weak enough to trigger my Invisible Wire, which allowed me to bring him back the following turn and deal a heavy 1700 points of damage to his Toon Alligator. He did give me a good scare by activating Brain Control and taking back Summon Skull for 1 turn, hitting me for a fat 2500 points of damage, but once the spell wore off, I got him back and was able to resurrect his Manga Ryuren and hit him for the final 2700 points needed. Jumping across the way to Keith, I used Darkhold pretty early to rid the board of a couple monsters, mainly Barrel Dragon, and Mesmeric Control, fuck, I forgot he had Metal Zoa. Oh, never mind, he's gone. Keith really loves to just run over his cards the second they get spellbound, huh? My draws were on fucking fire this duel, allowing me to Invisible Wire his Robotic Knight and Launcher Spider, although he did get one of my Grave Robbers with Magic Jammer, which I also kind of forgot he had. I then draw into all 3 copies of my Monster Reborns, allowing me to bring back Barrel Dragon and Metal Zoa, who I then use to wipe out the remainder of his life points. Labyrinth Ruler, Ishtar, and Richard of York are duels that I've never particularly struggled with, so all 3 of these more or less come down to the exact same strategy that I've been using. For Labyrinth Ruler, I just kept taking control of his wall shadows to box him in. Ishtar is similar to Bakura in that she mainly uses weaker monsters to move through the crush, which made attacking her that much easier. And I once again channeled that Heart of the Cards-ass luck to just invisible wire all of Richard's monsters, eventually hitting him with Dark Hole, resurrecting his Judgment, and finishing him off in 2 turns. Kaiba was an interesting one since he busted out Royal Decree on turn 5, which once again renders all trap cards ineffective. But you know it's not a trap card? Dark Hole, baby! This not only destroyed Royal Decree and opened up the roadblock that was guarding his deck leader, but also took out one of his Blue Eyes White Dragons, which I resurrected the next turn, juiced up with 2 Megamorphs, and got a power increase from Kaiba's own Dragon Treasure, capping him out at 4100 attack. I then chased him towards the center of the board, which I had blocked off with Judgment and Mesmeric Control, then was hit with the horrifying sounds of a Destiny Draw. Destiny Drawing is a weird mechanic that I think is only present in Duelists of the Roses, and occurs when the duelist is below 1000 life points and is severely outnumbered on cards basically on the verge of losing, at which point they will draw from a specific pool of cards, but the most common ones that I've seen personally in the campaign are Raigeki or Mirror Force, and Ryoku I think might be in there. I'm not really sure, the rules are kind of vague. For this specific instance, I assumed that Seto drew into Mirror Force, so I shifted everything into defense position and activated it with Call of the Haunted. Had I not done this, every single card of mine in attack position would have been destroyed, which would have pretty much meant I lost. Thankfully though, I've been around the bend a time or two and was able to box him in 2 turns later, sending us on to the final duel of the game with a man I frequently refer to as the Skull Knight guy. This motherfucker Ryoku'd me first turn, which I did think would be the end of it, but I was able to Cursebreaker the monster, dropping her back to her original stats. I am still out the life points, but at the very least there's not a hulking freak just skulking about. After a few turns and a handful of invisible wires, he hits me with Tremendous Fire, dealing 1000 points of damage, then Raigeki'd nothing. Just wanted to keep me on my toes, I guess. Instead of using Grave Robber to bring back a Monster Born, I instead hit him with his own cheaty bullshit card, cut his life points in half with Ryoku, adding them to my Dark Elf, then brought back his only other monster in the graveyard to deal 900 points of damage, almost tying up the game. I once again said my Hail Marys, Dark Hold the board, reborn his Skull Knight, and finished him off with his own deck leader. And once again, if that ain't poetic, I genuinely don't know what is. They're the rhyming ones, right? And there you go, folks. Duelists of the Roses, both sides, no monsters, all wrapped up for your pleasure. I also just recently realized that it is Duelists of the Roses, not Duelist of the Roses. So I've been really trying to enunciate that Duelists S on the end there. But maybe I'm alone there. I'm not sure. I want to say thank you again for watching my video and basically listening to me explain the exact same duel 21 times. Really appreciate that a lot, not gonna lie. It truly does mean a lot to me that you would take the time out of your day to watch some bullshit that I make. If you're interested in more Duelists of the Roses content, that Robin and Zephyr video is linked below. And also, last year I did a challenge run using the worst deck, the Cruel deck, and basically going beginning to end, no edits, and some people seem to like it. Other people, not so much. They said that running out the clock is not a viable strategy and that it's cheap and lame. And, well, I can't even deny that. But they said it really meanly, so I don't like them. So again, those are below if you do want to check those out. Otherwise, I've been Aqua Sloth. You guys have been great, as always. And I will see you in the next one. Also, if you want to join the Discord, links below. That's it. That's the only link I got. I really thought I had more. Anyway. Goodbye!